Hello guys, today we will be looking at the story of Alan Wake 2, but before we start I just want to tell you that to support my channel please like the video and subscribe. Alan Wake 2 is a 2023 survival horror video game developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Epic Games Publishing. The sequel to Alan Wake, 2010, the story follows best-selling novelist Alan Wake, who has been trapped in an alternate dimension for 13 years, as he attempts to escape by writing a horror story involving an FBI special agent named Saga Anderson. Alan Wake 2 was released for PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X on the 27th of October, 2023. The game received generally positive reviews from critics and was nominated for multiple Game of the Year awards. It sold over 1.3 million units by February 2024, making it Remedy's fastest-selling game. Compared to the original Alan Wake, which is an action-adventure game with horror themes, Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror game played from a third-person perspective. Players play as Alan Wake or Saga Anderson in two separate single-player stories, which can be played in any order the player chooses, although the opening and ending sequences can only be played as Saga and Alan, respectively. The game starts with a monologue by Alan while showing him with a glowing hole in his forehead. A naked man emerges from the dark shores of Cauldron Lake, experiencing visions of a man violently screaming before he is found and has his heart cut out by a group of men wearing deer masks. FBI Special Agent Saga Anderson and her partner, Alex Casey, are dispatched to the town of Bright Falls to investigate a series of ritualistic murders. They investigate the latest victim, the naked man, who is revealed as former FBI agent Robert Nightingale. It is believed he was murdered by a group calling themselves the Cult of the Tree. In addition to Nightingale's corpse, Saga finds a mysterious manuscript page that seems to predict the future. While in the town, they encounter Sheriff Tim Breaker, who promises to assist their investigation, as well as waitress Rose Marigold, who recognizes Saga and acts like Saga was a local of the area, despite this being her first visit to the town. Saga then performs an autopsy on Nightingale's corpse, but it suddenly reanimates and escapes the morgue after Breaker mysteriously vanishes. As they pursue Nightingale to Cauldron Lake, Casey says he had investigated a murder cult in New York dedicated to bringing back the missing author Alan Wake by reenacting the murders described in his books, and that Nightingale came to Bright Falls to pursue Alan 13 years prior. Saga encounters Nightingale, now converted into what the manuscript called a Taken, and is forced to kill him. Saga then finds a very shaken Alan Wake washed up on the shore of the lake and takes him into custody while also discovering evidence that an organization called the Federal Bureau of Control has a presence in Bright Falls. Saga and Casey take Alan back to the inn, where he recounts how he escaped from a dreamlike dimension called the Dark Place. While trapped in the Dark Place, Alan continually tried to find a way to escape. After appearing in a mysterious talk show called In Between with Mr. Dorr, Alan found an angel-shaped lamp that, in combination with his writing ability, allowed him to manipulate the Dark Place to better navigate it. Alan began navigating a dark, twisted version of New York City, following the trail of Alex Casey's investigation of the Cult of the Word led by Alan's evil doppelganger, Mr. Scratch, who survived his erasure from existence, which brought him through the various scenes of the murders committed by the cult. Along the way, Alan also encountered Breaker, who was searching for the talk show host, Mr. Dorr, believing him to be responsible for trapping him in the Dark Place. Alan also occasionally made brief contact with Saga, the two of them trading vital information when they could. After believing he had killed Tom Zane, who had gone insane from his captivity inside the dark place, Alan was contacted by an alternative version of himself, explaining that his repeated attempts to escape the dark place are causing him to experience time loops. Back in the present, Alan explains that he wrote a new novel, Return, that helped him escape the dark place. However, Scratch re-edited the manuscript into a horror story now taking effect in reality. Alan warns that Scratch is searching for the clicker, which is the key he needs to free the malevolent dark presence completely, but also the key to permanently defeating it. With one of the manuscript pages mentioning the cult of the tree possesses the clicker, Saga decides to follow its trail and realizes that Return has rewritten her past so that her daughter Logan drowned in an accident. Angered that Alan wrote her and Logan into his story, Saga recovers the clicker from taken deputies Mulligan and Thornton, but before she can get it to Alan, agents from the FBC led by Agent Kieran Estevez arrive and apprehend him, as well as the cult leaders, revealed to be town entrepreneurs Ilmo and Jocko Koskela. With no other options, Saga tracks down Odin and Tor Anderson, who know more about the clicker. As she communicates with them and rescues Tor from a taken Cynthia Weaver, she learns that Odin and Tor are actually her granduncle and grandfather, respectively, and she inherited their seer abilities, allowing her to discern the changes to reality Return is causing. Odin and Tor also explain that the clicker does not do anything by itself but instead dramatically enhances the creative power of the person using it, which is why it is important to Alan and Scratch. Saga then heads back to Bright Falls to get the clicker to Alan, but finds out that the Alan who escaped Cauldron Lake wasn't Alan, but Scratch. With his identity now exposed, Scratch kills Jocko and escapes from captivity, attempting to take the clicker from Saga. He is temporarily thwarted and banished, thanks to the FBC's light technology, leaving Saga wondering what to do next. Ilma reveals that he and Jocko formed the cult in order to scare townsfolk away from the dangers of the lake, while they perform their ritual killings on whatever taken emerges from it, such as Nightingale. Realizing that Alan is still trapped in the dark place, Saga enlists the help of Casey, Odin, Tor, and Estevez to carry out a ritual to summon him to the real world. Meanwhile, Alan continues to try and find a way out of the dark place, eventually making his way to his old apartment. There, he discovers his wife Alice had been tormented with visions of Scratch, which he photographed and turned into an art exhibition called The Dark Place, hoping to find Alan through them. However, her obsession drove her to despair until eventually she photographed her own suicide. In anger, Alan kills who he believes is Scratch, but is actually a version of himself attempting to fix Scratch's ending of Return, perpetuating the loop. Realizing that he was the one terrorizing Alice instead of Scratch, Alan lets the dark presence possess him. Back in the real world, the summoning ritual fails to summon Alan in the current time and instead was responsible for his initial appearance earlier in the story. Both Saga and Alan come to the realization that Alan and Scratch were always the same person, with Scratch being Alan, who is possessed by the dark presence at the end of every loop, which Alan later realizes became weakened from crossing into the real world, forcing it into dormancy while regaining its strength. Scratch arrives at the summoning site and Saga is able to banish him from Alan's body, only for Scratch to possess Casey instead, steal the clicker, and throw Saga into the dark place. With Scratch in possession of the clicker, Alan concludes that the only way to stop him now is to find the manuscript and write a completely new ending for Return. He returns to his writing room and tries to work out how to write a perfect ending that saves everybody while staying consistent with the horror genre, realizing that Saga is his co-author to help write the ending together. Meanwhile, Trapped in her mind palace, Saga fights off the Dark Presence's attempt to overwhelm her with her own negative emotions and self-doubt. Now in the Dark Place proper, she reunites with Breaker, who remains there in his search for Door, heavily implied to be Saga's missing father. She then receives aid from an anonymous woman, implied to be Alice, who directs her to the clicker and a bullet of light. Saga takes the two items and escapes back to the real world by mimicking Door's actions on a manuscript page. Connecting to Alan through her mind palace, they realize they are the heroes of the story, but for the ending to save everyone, one of the heroes needs to pay a heavy price. With the clicker and Alan's revised ending for Return, Saga is able to banish Scratch from Case's body. Alan goads Scratch into possessing him again, and Saga shoots him with the bullet of light, seemingly killing him and Scratch, but looping his monologue back to the beginning of the game, creating a time loop for each playthrough. As Casey recovers from his possession, Saga tries to call Logan to confirm her safety, but the scene cuts short before any answer can be heard. In a post-credit scene, a recording left behind by Alice reveals that after speaking to the FBC at their offices, as mentioned in Control, she had managed to fully regain her memories of what happened to Alan and her time in the Dark Place. She used her exhibition to trick Alan into thinking she committed suicide, but instead chose to return to the Dark Place as part of a plan to help him eventually escape, explaining that the only way he can escape the loops is through either destruction or ascension. Alan must continue the loop and keep going through destruction until he's ready for ascension, with Alice's words and love as his light preparing him bit by bit. Alan then revives from his gunshot wound and says, "It's not a loop, it's a spiral." The new Game Plus mode, the final draft, has a different ending. As he hands Saga his revised ending for Return, Alan remembers that the Dark Presence has caught them in a time loop that makes them forget right until the end, and that choices in the Dark Place can affect both the future and the past. He realizes that the Dark Presence was born from the remains of darkness from Alan after he was shot by the bullet of light. The Dark Presence eventually found Alan in the past and influenced him, kickstarting the plot of the first game. The link between it and Alan was severed after finishing Return, but the Dark Presence remained as Alan was missing the part of himself it was born from, Alice. Realizing that he and Alice are still connected through his writing and her photos, the bullet of light finally succeeds and kills Scratch for good, breaking the loop. Saga's call connects, confirming Logan's survival, and Alan revives soon after to the surprise of her and Casey. Confirming the ending worked, he thanks Alice, then declares himself the bearer of the light and the master of not just two worlds, but many. A video Alan can find in the final draft shows an earlier version of himself that derives that the notes, clues, and writings that guide him on his journey, which he thought were from himself in previous loops, may also partly be from a future version of himself from beyond the loops, some elevated, enlightened version, using the current Alan as a pawn to create his own apotheosis. Thanks for watching guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did please like the video.